What I think is amazing though is I think I've known two couples in the entire time I have been around, gay and lesbian people. I've only known two couples who have ever heard of any sort of violence, and it was to the point where it was reason everyone knew about it because it was so bad.
So bad.
And I had volunteered at the the gay men's domestic violence in Boston.
Yeah.
I sat there and I did like you fold things and you put them in, and I talked to a bunch of people there about the issues that they face and the violence and whatnot, and it was just shocking because no one talks about it. How do you ever? Your job must be really hard because you have people calling you, or people coming to you. But other than that, people don't really talk about it at all. I didn't even know it really existed.
Well, it's so interesting too because one of the huge things that the domestic violence movement in general, regardless of identity of anybody involved, is really having a hard time facing is the fact that, I just lost it. What is it? Oh, the fact that domestic violence isn't just a physical, one person is hitting another person. It brings in all aspects of a person's life. So that's emotional and spiritual and physical and economic and, through minimizing and denying and blaming all the time or using children or pets or using isolation. Like I've said before, our community is a small one. And so if a batterer is saying to their partner, you can't go out and hang out with your friends, it effectively cuts them off in so many ways from support systems that might possibly be there. And I think because there isn't any talk about that, a lot of the time really unhealthy relationships and battering relationships are not critically examined in our community. And it really just enables it to grow so that it can continue happening. And victim blaming is really, really huge.
What is victim blaming?
Victim blaming is the classic sort of example is a woman in a short skirt walking down an alley and she gets raped and they're like, well, why were you wearing a short skirt? Well, why was she raped? Come on here. And so that plays out as well in domestic violence of being say in a gay man relationship, well, he's yelling at you all the time, well, why did you do to make him mad? Regardless of the fact of, what was really the context that's going on. And that's one of the things that we really try to look at. Because a lot of the time people calling us don't have a name for what's going on. They just know that it's a wrong situation, something feels bad. It doesn't feel right. They're scared of their partner. They're really worried that they're doing something wrong. They feel bad all the time. How does that, but that doesn't necessarily, think, oh, domestic violence. So one of the things that we really try to do is look at the context of what's been going on in the relationship and the intent behind the people behind that context. Because there's also a huge myth that because LGBT relationships may be same-sex, that there's an equal exchange of power. The only power that is out there is one that's based on, sex or gender. And really what it is everybody has power, and that's not something that we can escape, and it's not something that's necessarily bad. It's just when people are willing to use that power that they have in order to put another person down or to try to take away their power is when it's a bad situation. I think that also it's difficult because of that mutual battering sort of myth, neither of you has more power, so both of you must be battering each other because you're yelling at them and they're yelling back at you, but what's the intent behind that? One person may be yelling because they want to take away power, or they want the other person to obey what they say, and the other person may be yelling because they're afraid, or they're trying to stand up to the other person because they've had so much gone on already. So that becomes really important in our work to be able to kind of hash out what's really going on there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What has been your greatest success so far?
Oh wow. Whew. That's hard to say. There's a lot of huge successes. I think, one of the successes is even SafeSpace being able to be started. We started as a subcommittee on the Chittenden County Domestic Violence Task Force, and it was because there was a gap in services that was identified for gay men as survivors. And there wasn't anyone that was able to kind of address that sort of issue and didn't know how to do it. So they started this subcommittee, which then, through getting a part-time grant writer, was able to write the VOCA grant, which is the Victims of Crime Act grant, that basically hired a full-time position and a half. So that was a huge start, and that was a huge success, and particularly in such a rural area and such a small area, to be able to get that started. I think there's been enormous movements forward, working with particularly the mainstream organizations. And of course the whole nonprofit world and social change world is work yourself out of a job. And I think that SafeSpace is actually effectively doing that. Hopefully not before I get my undergraduate loans paid off, but I don't think I have to worry about that. So I do think that we're really moving forward, and I think that the issues of queer survivors are much more on the minds and on the radar screen of a lot of the mainstream domestic violence organizations that we work with right now. And let's see, other successes. We just keep on growing, and we have great reach in terms of being able to establish connections and effective collaborations with a lot of the other organizations in the area. Obviously, as I'm sitting in RU1 too, and and as a movement, I think that it's extremely important, because the more that we can recognize some of the weaknesses of our community and some of the parts that really need to change, the stronger our community gets. And I think that the more that we have people from within our community standing up and saying, going to their friend and saying, look, you're in an abusive situation, and I'll be there for you, and I'll help you leave if you want that right now. I support you, and I care about you. Or friends going to their friend and saying, look, you're doing things that aren't cool. Why are you talking to them like that? Why are you calling and checking up all the time? Why are you stalking them? And really recognizing violence for what it is and calling it that, and really making sure that they're holding people accountable for that. I just think that we just, as a community, will grow so much stronger and so much more healthy and so much more able to, take on people that don't like us outside of our community as well. And I think that is a huge success of the movement in general.
So you can get donations. You have a website.
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
It's www.safespacevt.org.
And there's a way on there to donate online?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good, so I can put it up there and people can hopefully
That'd be great.
Send you some money.